Hey guys, it's Ryan with Nexbooks, and so I'm excited to talk to you about sort of tips to create kind of a flexible homeschool schedule. And really, I think that's one of the most important things about even considering, like, should I even be a homeschooling family or should I homeschool my kid? And the difference for me is this flexibility. This is what we go after. This is why it's so cool to homeschool in the first place. And I actually taught in brick and mortar schools. I taught in private schools, public schools, summer school, charter schools. I even taught in a homeschool collective, which is super cool. But the whole time I also ran a learning center. So I tutored kids and I would talk to them at great length, and the parents. And the complaints were all similar. And one of the biggest fundamental flaws kind of in the traditional school is this inflexibility in the schedule, right? And so that's why it's so great as homeschoolers to be able to offer flexibility. And it's funny, like the premise for the traditional school is actually pretty absurd if you think about it. Like, okay, so everybody, when they turn 10, they will want to learn this and they'll be ready to learn this and they'll all be at the same point, like ability-wise and interest-wise and affinity. And so it's totally crazy. If you have kids, which obviously you do, if you have 2 kids or 3 kids, you already know that those 3 kids are not the same. At 10 years old, they're not identical humans. So that premise has been proven false like thousands of times over. But we're not trapped in that as homeschoolers. So that's one of the most exciting things is this flexibility in the homeschool schedule. It's funny, I actually remember when a good friend of mine, the moment she decided to homeschool her family, and it was when her daughter was in, like, I don't know, 2nd or 3rd grade, and all the kids, for whatever reason, were super into dinosaurs. It was like Disney came out with a dinosaur movie or whatever, but they all had dinosaur lunch pails and dinosaur t-shirts. And so she thought, perfect. So she actually bought a really expensive curriculum kit, right? It was like, I don't know, thousands of dollars. And it was this big expensive kit that the whole class could learn from with like dinosaur bones and posters and all this cool stuff, right? And she brought it to the teacher and she was so proud. And the teacher was like, thank you so much. This is like the most generous gift ever, but maybe we can use it next year. We can't use it this year. And the mom was like totally like confused, like, why not? They love dinosaurs. And she said, well, these dinosaurs, the study of dinosaurs comes up in next year's standards, right? And so it's this inflexible model that is totally ridiculous. The mom wanted to strike while the iron was hot, teach them about what they love, but the traditional school wouldn't allow that. So she right there made that decision that I think homeschooling is a better option. So this is what's so cool is this flexibility. So we'll discuss some of the tips today about how to create kind of this flexible homeschool model. But with regard to this flexibility in this schedule, there's not just the flexibility in the school day, which is the first thing we kind of think of, but really there's kind of 3 layers of this flexibility, right? Yes, there's the flexibility in how we build out each school day, of course. Then you can kind of be flexible in how you build out the school year, right? There's 12 months in a year. Traditional models, it's kind of like the 9 months and then they have summer off and all these things. So we can be flexible about how we build it out through the year, but also you can be flexible. The 3rd layer is how you build out your entire kind of school career for your children, all the way elementary through middle and through high school. And so there's really flexibility all the way along, not just from day to day. But before we kind of discuss some of these tips about how to make some cool decisions about this, the first thing is that your curriculum has to be as flexible as you are. When you go to choose curriculum, you're going to be shopping for it and looking at different products. And the good news is there's tons, and there's some are really exciting. Some of the characteristics you should look for, first is really you should be self-directed. At Nexbooks, all of our courses are self-directed, and that's super important. That means that your student can move as fast as they want or as slow as they want, and either problem is a big problem. If you're not being allowed to move forward as fast as you should or organically would, then it's frustrating. You're like constantly irritated that you want to run with this topic and you can't. So same thing if it's going too fast. You don't want to be like jumping from deadline to deadline and never learning quite enough. And so this idea of self-directed is really important. And some parents tell me, they're like, well, that's true, but my child doesn't really accomplish anything unless they know the deadline they have to finish. If that's the case, and a lot of times that is, then I suggest that you kind of build in as a family your own deadlines, right? You can set these deadlines. Friday, this is due. Wednesday, that's due. But I wouldn't let the curriculum provider set those deadlines for you. You know your family best. Are you going to take a vacation? Are you tired? Do you need more time or less time? So I would make sure that the curriculum doesn't set those deadlines and that they're self-directed. That's how Nexbooks is, and that's what you should look for. The second kind of major characteristic about curriculum, if you intend to be flexible and building the schedule, is that it should be mastery based, right? And that means, like, for example, at Nexbooks, the students can take the quiz as many times as they like until they've mastered it, right, before they move forward. And that's really important. Mastery base is essential. It's funny, I remember Sal Khan, like right from Khan Academy, had an interview and he said something really intelligent. He had an analogy, and I'm paraphrasing, but he basically said, imagine if you hired some contractors to build your house and you overheard the contractors talking, and the guy building the foundation was talking to the guy that was going to build the walls, right? And he's like, you know what, we're mostly done with the foundation. We're at like 75%. That's pretty good, right? It's not an F. 75% is passing. Go ahead, start the walls, right? That's absurd, right? You obviously need to get 100% of the foundation down before you can move on. And, education, academic education, isn't exactly like that, but it's a good analogy, right? We want you to really master the topic. So again, that's why we do that at Nexbooks, and you should look for that in whatever curriculum you pick. You want it to be mastery based. So if the curriculum allows for flexibility, now you can start to talk about building the flexibility into your own life at those 3 levels, either during the day, during the school year, or else the entire career. So with regards to flexibility in the overall kind of career of your kid in school until college anyways, starting with the elementary school years, really the main tip I would offer there is that do not feel like some kind of weird loyalty to the traditional schooling system where they have everyone advancing in every subject at exactly grade level, right? That is a broken model, and that's one we don't have to follow. We can be flexible with the elementary school years with our kids, right? And so what that means is it is natural, and it absolutely should be the case that they are in different grade levels for different subjects. For example, maybe your kid loves math. They should be at 6th grade math and 4th grade reading, or flipped, the vice versa of that, right? And so it's almost impossible actually that the opposite would be true, that if you took someone, they would happen to learn exactly the right subjects at exactly the right age, right? If you look at like me, I'm kind of into editing videos, right? And I also like gardening. So, I'm advancing in those 2 things at different paces based on what I'm good at or what's difficult and whatnot. So that's the first level, is let them grow organically. It is very frustrating if you want to move forward fast and someone slows you down. It's also very frustrating if the opposite is true. If someone slows you down, or speeds you up when you're not ready, right? So let them grow at their own pace. As a homeschooler, of course you're going to have to report to the state, and it depends on the state and the district, but you'll want to report, that you're meeting standards for your child, your student, of course. But again, so, they're going to ask, are they reading at 3rd grade level or 4th grade level like they should? But there's flexibility there, and you can report that you're, giving them the content and the curriculum. But I wouldn't be overly, feel handcuffed to that system where they need to advance in every topic at the same level. Don't make them do that. That is not natural. Let them grow how they grow. It's funny, when I taught for years in the brick and mortar schools, and it was funny, I used to sit in these meetings and they would be like, yes, Billy's doing very well in math, but we're very concerned because Billy is a little bit behind in this particular topic, right? And I always used to think during these meetings, like I can imagine like Albert Einstein's parents sitting in one of these conferences and they're like, yes, Albert is doing very well in science. He seems to love that, but his 5-paragraph essay is below grade level. It's a very serious concern for all of us, right? Like, who cares? Like, he's got a passion and something he's good at. Let him run with it. And the 5-paragraph essay will catch up when it catches up. And I think that's something to keep in mind. Don't be intimidated by the current system that the school uses. In fact, that's a broken model. Let's be flexible and creative when we homeschool our kids. As far as middle school, it's the same advice, right? Let them grow how they grow. The only difference there is that if you were a middle schooler and you were going to stay homeschooled, fine, that's great. But if you are going to homeschool your middle schooler with the full intention of going to a normal traditional high school, a brick and mortar high school, you may run into some issues there. It's very common for them to not accept courses that were high school level that you took in middle school. So for example, let's say your kid is a math prodigy and they took calculus in middle school. I would be shocked if they transferred to a kind of a brick and mortar high school that they accepted that. Typically they'll say, what happened in middle school happened in middle school. You have to take calculus again. Not the end of the world, but it's something to consider that yes, it's possible that your credits may not transfer. Depends on the state, depends on the district, some details, but that's typically the case. Other than that, middle school, treat it like elementary school. Let them grow how they grow. If they love reading, let them advance to 12th grade reading, even though they're at 8th grade math or whatever the case. And as for the high school kind of plan or strategy, really there's sort of 2 options. One, if you're kind of going the traditional route. Traditional, I mean like 4 years. It's funny, that's not a guarantee. I remember I heard this one tech executive that was questioning education, and he was talking about college, and he said, who decided college was 4 years, by the way? Like, If you're a computer science major or, an engineer or a rec major or sociology, it's 4 years no matter what. Like, that's absurd anyways, but let's call it the traditional model of 4 years. You're really looking at two options, and it really depends on your goals and your kids' goals. They could either be applying to competitive 4-year schools, right? Or they could be, under the understanding that they're going to go to a community college, and that changes your strategy, changes your ability to be flexible, right? With the applying to a 4-year school, obviously they're going to take required classes. They're also going to do the SAT prep, right? Or any kind of these standardized tests. And so what that means for you is you can start the SAT prep, the standardized freshman year, and do small increments until junior year when they take it, right? And that way they had a long ramp to prepare for that. Or you can wait till the last minute and take crash courses or whatever. As far as the community college route, it's a little bit easier. You can sort of be more flexible in which courses you take because there's no accreditation issues or any kind of application issues there. And of course, there is no standardized test, no entrance exam, quote unquote, required, no ACT or SAT. So that frees up some energy and time to do some other cool electives and whatnot. So that's it for the kind of traditional route. Depends on your goals, how flexible you can be. But an entirely different strategy, kind of knocking out that 4-year concept, we kind of jokingly refer to as the prodigy plan, but it does make sense. That name actually makes sense. And really right now, if you were to want to go to a community college, there's some basic requirements. You have to be 18, or you have to have a high school diploma, or maybe, a GED in order to actually go to college, to go to a community college or a junior college. And so is there a way around that? And there is. If you had someone that really was super academic and loved learning and actually wanted to go to college level at an earlier age, earlier than is offered in the GED and earlier than 18, like 14 or 15. And not that I'm recommending this plan, but there is a route to do that. And a lot of states have what's called basically it's a equivalency exam. It's a high school equivalency exam. So it means if I pass this test, I pass the equivalent of knowing high school content. And so what you can do is you can pass this high school equivalency exam and then go straight to a community college. And if you did that at 15, and you did 2 years at community college, now you're 17 applying to 4-year schools to finish in 2 more years. So again, I don't think you should necessarily push your kid into this, like, you will graduate college by the time you are 11, right? But if you do have that kid, and you probably would know because it's your family, there is an option to not necessarily do 4 years of high school. You can cut that short using this kind of secret kind of prodigy route, which is the this exit exam. And then what about flexibility the actual school year, right? So we talked about like from, elementary school all the way through high school, but what about flexibility within the year? And the idea is, right, in the traditional model, you might cover these topics, simultaneously throughout the year, right? We're going to do English, we're going to do math, we're going to do social studies or whatever, right? Well, that's not necessarily like mandated if you're homeschooled. Remember, you want to cover these subjects or these courses in this school year. You don't have to do them that way. You don't have to say, we're going to do 5 simultaneously all the way through, right? You could stack them. So some people prefer, hey, I want to totally immerse myself in just math. So for the month of January, it's January math month, right? We're just going to do math until we're done with how much we want to accomplish in that year. Then we can switch to history, right? And then we can switch to English. Again, whether or not this is perfect for your kid, only you know, and that's the beauty of homeschooling, right? So you could do that, or you could stick to the traditional model where we do a little bit of each the whole way through, or you could do a hybrid. Maybe I do 2 at a time, right? And let's say we know math is really hard for us, but history comes naturally. Why don't we group them so that the level of difficulty is managed, right? And so this concept of covering the subjects or the courses throughout the year, there's different ways to do that, different hybrid versions of how to address that. So that's a key as far as building in flexibility. Another tip for how to manage the school year and building in flexibility is one that I love, and it's essentially building in, your learning around travel if you're going to travel as a family, road trip, or even a big trip to Europe or somewhere like that. And there's 2 ways to look at it. One is when we travel, which I think traveling is one of the best forms of education anyways, right? And so you say, I don't want to force my child to learn anything other than the trip we're on, which is totally awesome. And then you can build in your coursework around that, your academic stuff around that. In those 2 weeks, you're just traveling. Or another way to do it is to actually tailor your curriculum for that trip, right? My sister took her 2 kids and her husband took her 2 kids on a long road trip across the US. And my mom actually she's a retired teacher. She actually built curriculum for their travels, right? Every town they went through, there was a little history lesson. This is the town that this battle happened during the Civil War or the Revolutionary War. So it's really cool. Again, that is if you're into that and if you like building curriculum. But I love this idea of saying, look, every December we do this, or every March we do this. And so let's be able to time things around that. Same thing with like seasonal things like sports. If your kid loves baseball or loves soccer and they're really busy during the baseball season, well then let's not maybe pile on too much coursework. We already know that ahead of time. So when we put things on the plate, the academic plate will matter based on what we understand about our year. And as for flexibility about the actual school day or maybe the school week, kind of that shorter time frame, really rather than just jumping straight like into academics, it's super important to discuss that like we're building human beings here, right? We're creating healthy, wonderful, beautiful kids. And so there's a lot more than just academics to consider. And so the flexibility allows for that, allows us to not only focus on academics. I think there's really 6 things to talk about right now. There's probably a million things that go into kind of creating a healthy human being, but 6 to kind of focus on just right out of the gate that are pretty easy to address, we'll cover. And the first is exercise. I mean, exercise is practically like oxygen or nutrients for a kid, right? They do need exercise. We all need exercise. There's so many important health benefits. So if we don't build it in as a homeschooling family, they're really just not going to accidentally come by it. So it could be really intense exercise like, sports, like they're on a soccer team or a tennis player or a surfer, right? Or it could be just casual exercise like, hey, every morning we walk our dog on the lakeside, or we walk our dog up the neighborhood, or maybe we go for a walk in the woods. And the reason I'm bringing it up is because, again, we can shift our academics around these things. So the first is let's make sure that the exercise happens. It's the key to really a healthy, long life. And the second, equally important though, is social interaction, right? That's the one thing that people are like, oh, if you're a homeschooling family, how do you guarantee social interaction? It's very easy to build in. We just have to be very deliberate about doing that, right? So you could get your social interaction through sports or through theater or through camps, right? We could do summer camps or an art camp, or where maybe we're in a ceramics class or anything. So it's easy to build in as long as we consider it a priority. One thing I love now that they have for social interaction is there's a lot of these groups on Facebook or other kind of social media where they say we are a homeschool group in this town. You can Google, like, we live here in Santa Cruz. Homeschool groups in Santa Cruz, and you can reach out to these groups and join them. They have ideas for fun stuff, but more importantly, and as important, they'll kind of meet up and have little social gatherings. And so that's really cool. And I don't think it's difficult at all to create these, but it does require focus. And let's make sure that's part of our, again, flexible planning. Let's build that in. Obviously, an important one is nutrition as well. I don't need to lecture you on offering nutrition to your child, but it is true. It's so nice because when you go to like a brick and mortar school, they're at school all day. They're like starving. They eat whatever they get their hands on. They're going to the, maybe the bad food at the cafeteria. So I love the idea that as homeschooling, we can make sure that they have their square meals and they're getting food when they need it, and they don't have to be starved until they get a hold of something that's not as healthy. So nutrition's good as well. Another one that's a little less tangible is really, it's important that we help them find a sense of confidence, right? Like, when you're getting older, especially middle school and high school, you really try to find yourself. You're like, well, this kid is a soccer star and she's really good at school, and he's really good at program. What am I? What is my identity? Where does my confidence come from? And so we kind of have to instill that as homeschooling parents, like offer them opportunities to build that confidence. And every kid's different. So who knows what it'll be? Will it be a sport, an instrument, a focus on this or that? So looking for and building in sort of example, like times and opportunities to build confidence are key. And another one is this kind of similar, is inspiration. Like, we are who we are. We became who we became because we were inspired at some point in our life, right? And where that comes from, who knows, but we need to look for as many opportunities as possible. One thing I love for inspiration for kids is I love setting up a coffee date with someone who does what they're interested in. Maybe they have a coffee with your friend who's a lawyer and he or she explains that job, or maybe someone owns a landscaping company and they explain that, and even stuff like going to city council meetings. I don't think inspiration or chances or opportunities for inspiration need to be like super fun, like, hey, fun, it's not really like, going to raging waters, that's more fun, or playing video games. It doesn't have to be super fun. It just has to be new stimuli, different stimulus that really will excite your kid or inspire them in different ways and kind of help them to grow. And the last one to build in then, yes, is the academic learning. And that's where we can fit it around all those other really important things. I don't think academics are more important than those other ones. I think it's a tie, right? And so let's now get that. The cool thing is now with your curriculum, your academic stuff, is there's so much curriculum out there that's awesome. These companies and these people are very creative, and they're building amazing curriculum for you. For example, us at Nexbooks, all of our lessons are video based because we know that's how kids love to learn. So, that's far better than what we had when I was a kid, where it was like 400 pages of pure text with like one photo in the middle, right? And so I don't think you have to settle. If your kid is bored or frustrated with your curriculum, switch. I mean, there's countless great curriculum providers that would love to be able to get in front of your kid and teach them different topics. And the reason we bring all those things up is that we do have a ton of flexibility as homeschoolers, but sometimes it's easy to forget that these are all necessary ingredients. That's the one thing about like kind of the brick and mortar traditional schools, is that they do build that in. They have like people advising them, and they say, well, the kids need inspiration. So they'll have assemblies, and they'll have guest speakers who will attempt to inspire. Each teacher will probably make an attempt to inspire, right? And they have social interaction. All these things are built in. And so at home, we just have to be deliberate about it. That's all. And that's what I love about this flexible schedule, is we can be deliberate, and we can, more importantly, balance it out even better than what happens at the traditional schools. But with regards to the academic piece alone, because sometimes that's the hardest piece, that's worth a discussion in itself, how to be flexible with the academic piece. And I think the first most important thing is that it's really important to judge when your kid learns best. For me, when I have a bunch of important work to do, I'll do it at 5 in the morning with a cup of coffee, and it's like my focus time, and I'm a morning person, right? Other people are like, oh, that's crazy, Ryan, I can only work in the afternoon. It's important that you identify that for your kid, because we can be flexible. Why do schoolwork, academic work, when we know that they're not focused, right? And so that's the first thing, determine that, and then build everything else around that time. Another tip about the academic piece is it's really important to take some of these harder concepts and break them down into shorter little bursts of academic focus, right? That's one thing. That's the reason why at Nexbooks we designed our videos to be 5 to 10 minutes. When we're covering, difficult science or math topics, it's important that our videos are short. Nobody's going to watch a 50-minute video on, math, right? It's too insane. That's like torturing an innocent child, right? So we do these 5 to 10 minute short burst videos. That's the easiest way for kids to learn. And so if you're going to plan your academic day for your kid, it's probably smart to break them into pieces, not too long, or else we totally lose focus. I tutored for years in, math and science, and we sometimes would have parents that would say, hey, Ryan, finals are coming up. Maybe tomorrow you could do 2 hours with little Jimmy, right? And I was always like, no, absolutely. That's impossible, right? Because 2 hours is just, after 1 hour, no kid can focus, right? It's like diminishing returns after an hour. So yes, break them into short bursts. That's the most effective way to schedule your academics throughout the day. And actually it matters by topic, right? If it's a topic they love, maybe it doesn't have to be so short. Math, maybe if they love math, let them run with it, right? They can do as long as they want. But if it's something they really struggle with, then even shorter, the better. Another good tip for planning the academic part of their day or part of their week is it's really cool to change settings, right? Not every kid is totally inspired like at the kitchen table. That's what happens. I know as a parent. It's like, which table has the least stuff on it? Oh, that one. Okay, well, that's where the homework is going to happen. That's not maybe the best place, best setting to learn. And so, I love when families go to coffee shops to learn and do their academics. It's great. There's stimulation. Maybe you get a cookie and there's people walking around and there's music. And so it's very easy to stay focused and be, totally aware and awake in a new setting. Maybe if you had a reading, like you just had a novel that you wanted your kid to read, well, then maybe do that at the beach or by a lake or somewhere cool, like in the woods. You don't have to always do kitchen table. It's important to change the setting if you want to kind of keep your kid excited about learning. And the last tip I have about like kind of building your week or your day around the academic stuff and the curriculum is that really like embrace like weird circumstances that come up. I remember one time in our town, I live in Santa Cruz and we have an ocean, and there was a whale that washed up. And yes, it was very sad that the whale died. It was a blue whale, but it was a total opportunity to go and study this thing. How often do you get to look at a blue whale up close? We saw the baleen. We were able to touch the baleen. And so it was amazing. And so remember, you have license to, you have the liberty to totally alter your plans and change things around special circumstances. So totally take advantage of that. Do so, right? If the butterflies happen to be passing through your town during their migration, pause activities and go study that if you're into that kind of stuff. And so same thing if there's a politician in town speaking and you'd like to, kind of put your kid in front of that. So just remember that that's one of the greatest benefits, one of the differences between a brick and mortar school, right? And what we're doing here with homeschooling is that we have that liberty. So let's be creative and take those and use that freedom to really enhance our kids' experience. So that's it. I mean, thanks for listening. You're going to get tons of advice from tons of friends and family, and that's good. Take it all in. But what's so cool about homeschooling is you know your family best and you know your kid best. And so you're really the author of this novel. You can create whatever world you want. And I just really encourage you to enjoy that and make it just a total passion. And I love that. Sometimes we get busy with trying to keep up with homeschooling, but that shouldn't be the case. Again, creativity is key. And so flexibility is key. And that's, again, one of the main reasons we homeschool in the first place. So thanks for listening. You can tell I'm passionate about it. Hopefully you enjoyed my rant about all the different ways to kind of customize your experience. And so, yeah, and we love it over at Nexbooks. I mean, one of the reasons we founded Nexbooks is to solve some of these problems that exist in regular school. So if you go to Nexbooks, we're at nexbooks.org. Type in under the discount code, type in flexible, because that's what this talk is all about, and we'll give you 25% off. So hopefully that helps. And all right, you guys, good luck with this kind of journey that you're on, which is homeschooling.